ars literaria. Everything that a scholar does, says, speaks, suffers, and hears, etc., must be an artistic, technical, and scientific product, or some such operation. He speaks in epigrams, she acts in a play. He is a dialoguist, she lectures on treatises and sciences. He relates anecdotes, stories, fairy tales, novels. He perceives poetically. If he draws sometimes as an artist, sometimes as a musician. His life is a novel, and that's why she sees, hears, and reads everything precisely in this manner. In short, the true scholar is the completely developed human being who bestows on whatever she touches and does a scientific, idealistic, and syncretistic form.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for having me again in your group. I'm happy to be here. I just wanted to say that verse from Novalis is really perfect for the book that I'll mainly be talking about this evening, which is this volume of the collected works that had just appeared. It's forthcoming. It'll be released May 24th on our website, SteinerBooks.org, called Becoming Fully Human. And that really is what Steiner is endeavoring to bring here is a picture of the whole human being. In German, the title is Damit der Mensch ganz Mensch werde. So that's a little bit hard to have a literal translation of that. So that the human being becomes fully human. A little bit of a clunky title, so we gave it Becoming Fully Human as a title, and it really fits beautifully with that verse from Novalis. So thank you. Before I get into my presentation, I do want to also acknowledge the crossing of Christopher Bamford, which happened early yesterday morning, because Christopher was, of course, very much involved in the collected works of Rudolf Steiner in English. The project was really spearheading that together with Jean Goligly, who crossed the threshold January 7th, 2021, so a year and 5 months ago. And these two individuals were the ones who really launched the Collected Works project. So I did want to acknowledge and even invite Christopher to be present with us this evening. As you know, in the spiritual world, there is no physical space. So the physical space that divides us this evening is not a factor in the spiritual world. There's really only soul space. So creating the right inner mood to invite Christopher into the space, the soul space with us. In one of the many introductions that he wrote to the Collected Works volumes that have been published so far, he wrote the introduction to this really wonderful volume entitled Our Dead, Memorial, Funeral, and Cremation Addresses of Rudolf Steiner. And Christopher saw fit to begin his introduction with the following quote by Rudolf Steiner, which I'd like to read to us as a way of inviting Christopher to join us. We live with the dead. The task of spiritual science now is to develop the consciousness of our belonging together with the souls of the dead. The rest of earthly evolution will not be able to unfold for the good of humanity if humanity does not develop the feeling, the living feeling of being together with the dead. I'll be speaking to you this evening about the collected works of Rudolf Steiner in English. I know from Bruce and Bruce Communications, which I keep up with, even though I don't often attend your meetings because it's rather late on this end for me. It's 10:15 now, and I'm sort of drifting into the night already. But I'm staying awake for this, and I know that you've been working with this volume, Art and Theory of Art, which really the greatest reward of my work is to hear that people are working with the books that I'm working to, and we at SteinerBooks together as a team are working to make available to the world. Rudolf Steiner's work in anthroposophy has really been the most central and important thing in my life, and really so transformative for my life. And for that reason, I feel deeply connected also with the collected works of Rudolf Steiner in English. Edition or project or vision of really making the entire body of Rudolf Steiner's work available in English. There are 350, roughly 354 volumes of the Gesamtausgabe, the complete works of Rudolf Steiner in German. So far in the collected works edition, we have 84 volumes. So not a slim amount, but also not, we still have 265 some odd volumes to go. Of course, many of the books of Steiner's works have been published already by various publishing houses over the course of the last century in English. But there are still 88, I counted, 88 volumes of the Gesamtausgabe, the complete works of Rudolf Steiner's works in German, that have never been translated or published in English. So we're 100 years from choose your moment in Steiner's work. We're approaching the 2025, the 100-year anniversary of Steiner's death. And there are still 88 volumes of his work that have never appeared in English. So one of the main things that we're focusing on and tasks that we're really taking up is to make those volumes in particular available, the ones that have never been made available in English before, never been published or translated into English before. One of those volumes is Art and Theory of Art. There were a few lectures and things, The Being of the Arts, Goethe as a father of new aesthetics, that were published sort of as individual in pamphlet form in English in the past, but as a whole volume, it was never published before. So we were very excited to birth that volume into the world in the fall. And the volume I'm going to be talking more about later this evening, Becoming Fully Human. This volume also consists of lectures, a lecture cycle that has none of it has been published or appeared in English before. And the lectures were given in April 1922, so essentially 100 years ago. So we have our work cut out for us, but we also have a tremendous motivation and gift behind us of those like Christopher Bamford and Jean Goligly, who really took this task on and already had 88 volumes into the world. So we're also now partnering with Rudolf Steiner Press. It's been happening for some years now. So together with Rudolf Steiner Press, we're trying to keep the steam going, keep the ball rolling on this project. But certainly it has a long future ahead of us. And okay, so I just wanted to mention briefly kind of, so what makes the collected works edition different than any other edition of a book by Steiner? So each of the volumes has at the back certain back matter that's included in each of the volumes. Part of it is an outline of the collected works of Rudolf Steiner. So all of the volumes listed, and the Gesamtausgabe, which we're following in the collected works in English, is divided into various parts. So the first part, first main section are the written works. So the first 45 volumes are written works, divided into different sections as well. Most all of the writings of Rudolf Steiner, so things that he wrote to be published in book form, have been published in English. But there are several volumes of collected essays, for example, that have never been published in English. So those are on our list to try to make available. Also acknowledging that Rudolf Steiner did intend these things to be published in print, unlike the lectures, which he had probably some of you know, had a sort of mixed relationship with how much that should be, how much should stay in the spoken word and how much should be published. And then there's also publications from the literary estate, so letters, poems, verses, some of that has been published. And then the second main section are all of the lectures, some 3,000, 6,000 lectures that Steiner gave over the course of his life. So that's the bulk of the collected works, are lectures. The first part are public lectures. Maybe not unsurprisingly, those are the ones that have been least published in English, the public lectures, because we anthroposophists really want to hear what Steiner had to say to the members of the Anthroposophical Society, and have not historically been so interested in what Steiner was saying to the general public, which I think it's very important that we actually get more of these public lectures published. This volume was open to the public, so they're considered public lectures. Because Steiner speaks in a very different way to people who have no familiarity with anthroposophy than he does to people who have been studying and working with anthroposophy for many years. And it's important, as a publisher, to also make more of that content available to general readership and reaching a wider audience. So that's sort of the overview of the entire collected works, which we provide at the back of the book for the interested reader who wants to get a sense of all the different titles there. And then we also have significant events in the life of Rudolf Steiner. So a brief outline of Steiner's biography at the back of the book, just as a means to familiarize people with what happened when in the course of his life. It isn't a beautiful biography or a long biography such as Peter Zelg's 7-volume biography of Rudolf Steiner that SteinerBooks published, but it's just a short glimpse into his life. And then at the very end, an index of some kind, a name index or a subject index for reference. And then the other big part of the work as the editor is also the editorial and reference notes. So Steiner, as you probably all know, often referenced obscure 19th century German philosophers who maybe Bruce knows, but the rest of us maybe don't. And so, the job of the editor in that sense is to then create and write notes to just give a context of who was this person. Did Steiner speak about this person in other places in his work? So giving sort of cross references across his work. for a a serious student of anthroposophy or of Steiner who wants to kind of, what if I wanted to look more into this theme or into this individual that Steiner speaks about, to try to just at least provide some clues for the reader in that way, where they can find more on that subject or on that individual. So those are all, and then we also try to include any relevant documents. So programs, we have in this one scanned copies of the program and the invitation to the lecture course. So sort of historical documents, and then also in this one we have a really lovely description that Steiner wrote of the lecture course, where he actually spoke about all of the different people besides him who spoke at the course. He talks about each of them in turn: Walter Johannes Stein, Karl Heyer, Ernst Uli, Dr. Baravala, Reda, and so on. So, and he gives these beautiful, lovely little descriptions of each of them, which is really, to me, it's quite amazing to hear Rudolf Steiner, what he perceived in each of these individuals, and the unique qualities of each of them and what they brought to the work at that time. So that's a gem, I think, in the back of this particular volume. And then, of course, each volume has an introduction to kind of give a context of the volume, and to my picture is to really give a doorway for the reader into the world of the volume. As a kind of welcoming into that world. So those are and we have also an expanded table of contents for each of them, for also to help in terms of tracking down certain themes or things that he speaks about in the lectures. And then all of the volumes have a unique image, but then a uniform cover design and the number of the volume on the side. So it's a cohesive aesthetic for the entire edition. Good. And so I think I'll just say a little bit more now about this particular volume, which you can already pre-order on our website now, and will be shipped to you on May 24th, if you are so inclined. I think this, I'm really in a way, I was quite shocked or amazed that this lecture course has never been published in English before, because it's really an amazing lecture course, and really representative of Steiner, and Steiner sort of at the height of his capacity, 1922, April 1922, and also speaking to an audience that was so the lecture course is generally categorized as one of the so-called university courses. So these were courses that that Steiner gave along with others, other lecturers. So they were entire, conferences basically. And there were other lecturers during the day, and then Steiner, in this case, gave evening lectures. And it was really at the invitation of students who were studying at university at the time, and created an alliance of students who wanted to bring anthroposophy into connection with the fields of study that they were engaged in, and to really fructify the various fields of academic study with the insights of anthroposophy. And so Steiner speaks on, it's not so much what does Steiner speak about in this volume as what does Steiner not speak about in this volume, because he really touches on the sciences, on mathematics, on poetry and sculpture and visual arts and eurythmy, on questions of religion of really the trinity of science, art, and religion, which I'll read a little bit from that later on. So it's a really dynamic and beautifully woven tapestry of the wholeness of human experience, becoming fully human. So I was editing and working with this volume. I was, just as I went along, I couldn't believe that it had never been made available in English before. Also because he's speaking to university students, mainly Dutch university students, and a public audience as well. So he isn't speaking to members of the society. He's speaking to people who are just coming to anthroposophy, but he does it in such a brilliant and extraordinary way. So I wanted to just read one thing, because I thought of you all in the second lecture, given your friendship with Novalis and his 250th birthday on May 2nd. It just felt this was the right thing to read as an example of how Steiner sort of weaves together these threads of human experience and human knowledge. So this is from the second lecture. It is strange, but it is so, that whoever reads the philosophy of freedom will find, I believe, that something like a mathematical thinking prevails in it. This philosophy of freedom aims at finding the human impulses for both freedom and morality. But the way in which it speaks about the moral world is not qualitatively different from what is present in us as a state of soul when we mathematize. You find only a few people in the world, I should say, who, if I may use the expression, have the right respect for mathematizing. This proper respect for mathematizing was held, for example, by a deep, charming, and extraordinarily sympathetic poet, namely Novalis. When Novalis, the wonderful lyricist, comes to speak of mathematizing, he says something like, in mathematizing, we have basically the most beautiful, the most magnificent, the most powerful human poetry before us. So mathematics is the most powerful human poetry. I was never very good at mathematics, but I'm inspired by Novalis here, and by Steiner's weaving of these threads, these interrelationships between the moral world order that we connect to with poetry and its reflection in the laws of mathematics. Something really special that happened in the course of this conference, which I think is one of these things that you discover. I was working on this book, and then I happened to be reading a book about Willem Zijlmans van Emmichhoven, who was a Dutch anthroposophist around at this time. And in there was a description of this course. So his son, Zijlmans' son, wrote the biography of his father, and he included a description of this lecture course in there. And he quoted from a letter by Helen Fortuyn, Helen Fortuyn was one of the organizers of the event. And she wrote this letter to her sister, reflecting on the event afterwards. So I'm just going to read from this. It gives you a really human picture of kind of what went on behind the scenes of the lecture course of the conference. So this is Helen Fortuyn. After the most beautiful of lectures on the visual arts, I returned home late in the evening. Hardly had we arrived when the telephone rings from the hotel. Can I come back immediately, for the Waldorf teachers are having a meeting and need me? I get on my bike straight away, leaving my guests to look after themselves and find their own way to bed. And there I find the whole crowd. Lily Vrede, Maddie von Deventer, Henk and Erna von Deventer, De Haan and his wife, Knobel, Max Stibbe, Cornelis Loos, Dan von Bemmelen, Willem Zeilmans, Walter Stein, Dr. Heyer, Herbert Hahn, Hermann von Baravala, Ernst Uli, Eugene Kalisko, Caroline von Heidebrandt, Karl Unger, Friedrich Husemann, and Pelikan. We had an intense discussion about the founding of a Dutch Waldorf school, and everyone was in favor. You don't need to worry about getting children and parents, said Kalisko. Mrs. Fortune will arrange that. Herbert Hahn gave me various pieces of good advice, his lecturing index finger almost touching the tip of my nose. What a delightful fellow he is. Do you know him? So lithe and light and funny and spontaneous. Just imagine the whole drei around the table, and they all started to become friends, more or less. We didn't finish until midnight. So I just love that the life that went on at that time, the founding, the seed for the founding of the first Waldorf school in the Netherlands took place behind the scenes until midnight during this academic course. I'll just finish my portion of the presentation. I thought this lecture in particular might speak to you all and to the work of the literary arts. It's the lecture on the visual arts, the most beautiful lecture on the visual arts, as Helen Fortune called it. And it is indeed an extraordinarily beautiful lecture, connected in many ways with the last lecture in Art and Theory of Art volume. There Steiner speaks about Goethe and Novalis as kind of polarities of the sculptural and the musical poetic element, and then eurythmy, the relationship of eurythmy to the musical poetical and the sculptural. And here again, he speaks in similar terms about the new art of eurythmy. And then he ends with, I think, just really beautiful words. So I'd like to read that to you about these three spheres of science, freedom that we achieve through science, the devotional life of religion, the need for sacrificing for something higher, and then the realm of art that stands between these two. If you become a free individual being through science, if you sacrifice your whole being in religious forms, still preserving your freedom on the one hand, but on the other, already sensing the need for sacrificial service, then you will find in art the possibility of preserving yourself by offering as a sacrifice in a certain way what the world has made of you. We form ourselves as the world has formed us, but we create this form out of ourselves as free beings. Thus, in art too, there is something redemptive and liberating. In art, we are, on the one side, individualities, while on the other side, we sacrifice ourselves. And thus, we may say, on the one side, truth makes us free if we seize it ideally, scientifically, also spiritually, scientifically. And so we may say on the other side, in beauty, we find again our connection with the world. We cannot be human without living freely in ourselves and without finding our connection with the world. You find your individuality in free thought, and then, in connection with the world, you find the possibility of making of yourself again what the world has made of you, by lifting yourself up into the realm of beauty, into the realm of art.